Just looking at the wires on the computer and all the screens around me, this one behind me is Philadelphia with breaking news of more protests and riots and things. The US President Donald Trump claiming that many Secret Service agents were just waiting for action and ready to unleash, and I quote, the most vicious dogs and the most ominous weapons I've ever seen, says Donald Trump. And this, of course, is all in relation to the murder of George Floyd, which happened recently. There are protests, there are riots happening all over the show. And there was an incident just 8 days earlier in Central Park, 5 decades after Martin Luther King was assassinated. So you've got to ask yourself, has there actually been any real progress on the racial front? And a man who's ensconced, immersed in all of this, now living in New Zealand, is our very own Dr. Harold Hillman, our executive coach. Good morning, Harold.
Good morning, Roman. Roman, it is something. It is, I've been in a very reflective headspace over the last week. There was that incident in Central Park that went viral where an African-American guy was out. He was a bird watcher. He was in Central Park to watch birds, and a woman had her dog off of the leash. He said to her, hey, would you put your dog on a leash because it's required, particularly in this part of the park. And she said, if you don't leave me alone, I'll pick up the phone and I'm going to call the police and tell them I'm being harassed by an African-American guy. And so he started videoing it. He said, go for it. And she did. She put up a scene, and it was, again, sort of fueling that perception that if a black man in America is walking towards you, you have reason to worry. It reinforces that notion. I was 12 years old, Roman, when Martin Luther King was assassinated in 1968. And Washington, D.C., I lived in Washington with my family, and Washington, D.C., and 10 other cities across America went up in flames that night, almost metaphorically to say that it is truly a burning issue now in that sense of race. And so I've been thinking about that. I was 12 years old in 1968, and here I am now, in 2020, 52 years ago. And thinking, wow, the George Floyd scenario it broke my heart. I can't even watch the video. I just, it says that there is still a long way to go.
Oh, heck, a hell of a long way. And you might have to...
Way to go.
Well, you'd probably say that we haven't gone anywhere at all over the decades. I mean, who is Donald Trump making America great for?
Yeah, goodness gracious. I mean, it really... I've been reflecting on. I remember when I was in university, I left Washington D.C. D.C. I don't know if most people know, but it's a predominantly black city. And I went to university in Allentown, Pennsylvania, a white city at a white university. I was one of 5 black students there. And I would go out jogging in the community, and there was 2 police officers in the same car. They would trail me each and every day. I went out every day, and they would say, "Are you lost?
What?
Do you need?" Implying that I shouldn't be in the neighborhood. And I went, "No, I go to Muhlenberg College," and they would, and so I just got used to them sort of trailing me, and that was when I really discovered, when it really hit me that. In America, very often, you are defined by race. You are defined by sexual orientation. You're defined by your demography, as opposed to, I've had a much better experience in New Zealand, I've got to say. No nation is perfect. We're all humans. Anytime you put people who are different together, there's going to be inherent tension there. But one of the reasons why I, decided to become a New Zealand citizen and to live here for the rest of my life is that when I walk up to people, I don't sense that I'm being defined by my race or my sexual orientation as a gay man. That was very tangible and real for me in the U.S. New Zealand isn't perfect. Certainly people will experience all kinds of scenarios like that, but it was a remarkable and tangible difference.
Well, regardless, Harold, of where you live or grow up, you would expect the recruitment process of any country's police force to root out that kind of prejudice, wouldn't you? Even in heated situations, they're trained to deal with things a whole lot better than this, but we're seeing this far too often in the US, aren't we?
Yeah, and look, I am the last person to paint a sweeping negative brush across police officers, because I realize that is a lot of people become police officers because of the passion and the ethic associated with wanting to help people. So it's always that 1 or 2%. When it happens, I have cousins who are police officers. I have friends in New Zealand who are police officers. And so I don't want to paint a sweeping brush, but goodness gracious, when it comes to community, and particularly in the U.S., race relations, here, for that matter, here in New Zealand as well, you want to go the extra step in making sure that that people trust you.
Well, look, most policemen, regardless of where they are, and most in the US would be disgusted in what happened, but the police generally reflect the society which they work in, don't you think?
This is true, and what this reflects, just those two incidents, as well as thousands of other incidents, is that it is still systemic. Yeah. That it is systemic, that it is what we're seeing bubbling up at the surface still goes down to the heart of mental models that certainly in America suggest that if you, it was 3 years ago, I can't remember the source, but it suggested that 1 out of every 3 black male teenagers in America as teenagers are going to sit in the back seat of a police car.
Yeah, it's just terrible, isn't it? Yep, it's all wrong, and it doesn't help when you have a leader saying publicly and vehemently on Twitter and all through the news channels that he's just waiting for action, ready to unleash the most vicious dogs and the most ominous weapons ever seen. Who says things like that at a time like this?
We are learning some incredible lessons about the power of leadership during a scenario. Certainly as we've been going through the pandemic, but also in a scenario like that with, riots going on now in various cities, and the President of the United States who then stands up to basically be divisive and antagonistic, as opposed to trying to, convey broader, more unifying values that make a difference. Donald Trump is his leadership certainly through the pandemic and just over the last few days it's abhorrent. It defies logic. It defies logic in terms of what I know and love. Though I'm a New Zealander and will spend the rest of my life here, I love America. And I cannot believe, I do hope that America rectifies a wrong that happened 4 years ago in November. And Donald Trump is certainly giving us all the reason to say, leadership makes a difference.
The people that we vote in any democracy, we trust them to do the right thing for us. We trust them to listen. We trust them to keep us safe. Let's talk about the trust triangle very briefly.
Yeah, it's just it's important right now for leaders, especially leaders of teams, to be just work harder to stay a bit more connected with people around you, because anxiety is high, and so the trust is important because it will make a difference in terms of how people work through over the next 6 months. There's just going to be a lot of uncertainty out there. So there's just 3 components of trust. This is based on a TED Talk, Roman, from Frances Frey, who is a Harvard Business School professor. And what she suggested was that in this TED Talk was keep your eye on authenticity, and that is be real with people, be genuine with people, be candid with people, give them information as you get it, don't hide. If you put pressure on yourself to be perfect, you then sometimes hide because you can't deal with the anxiety. And so just be real with people is one component. The second component is empathy, which you and I spoke about a couple of weeks ago, and that is just sit down and create the time and the space. Let people talk to you. Let them ventilate. Don't feel the pressure to fix everybody's problem.
And you just can't, can you? And you can't. We all want to, though. And the third part of the triangle is logic, and we'll come back to that next week. Harold Hillman, executive coach there from the Sigmoid Curve Consulting Group. Thank you.